The rain hadn't stopped in 3 days. Outside the hospital window, gray clouds loomed over the city like a warning. Inside room 207, everything felt too still. Sterile walls, faint beeping machines, and the soft shuffle of nurses trying not to disturb anyone who might still be clinging to hope. And I was clinging, with all I had left. My name is Claire Bennett, and I was 29 years old when I found out the truth that broke me completely. Not all at once, but in slow, piercing pieces. Truth that came too late. Truth that left a hole where my heart used to be. Lying on the hospital bed, my breath came in shallow waves. Tubes ran from my arm, and a heart monitor pulsed beside me with every weak thump of my body. I knew I didn't have much time, but that wasn't what terrified me most. What haunted me wasn't death. It was the thought of taking my last breath before ever knowing what happened to my baby. The one I held, the one I raised, the one I loved more than anything. Or so I thought. Before we continue, please write in the comments which country you're watching this video from. Enjoy listening. 3 years ago, my life had felt perfect. I had a husband, Michael, a strong, kind man I'd met in college. We lived in a modest house in the suburbs, just outside of Portland. It wasn't fancy, but it was ours. We were excited, nervous, full of dreams. Especially when I found out I was pregnant with our first child. We painted the nursery pale yellow. Bought a tiny rocking chair, practiced breathing techniques. I even packed the hospital bag 6 weeks early. I was ready, or so I thought. But nothing prepared me for what actually happened. The birth wasn't smooth. Complications hit fast. I remember the doctors rushing. I remember Michael's worried eyes, and then nothing. Just blackness. I was under for more than 36 hours. They said my body went into shock, that I lost too much blood, that I should be grateful I even made it. When I finally woke up, dazed and sore, the nurse smiled and said, "Congratulations, Mommy. You have a beautiful baby girl." They handed her to me, a tiny bundle with soft skin and deep brown eyes. Eyes that looked nothing like mine or Michael's, but I didn't think twice. I was just glad she was alive. I named her Lily, and from that day on, I poured every ounce of my soul into raising her. Michael was distant at first, distant in ways I couldn't explain. He said he was tired, that he was overwhelmed. But something in his gaze lingered on Lily too long sometimes. Not with warmth, but with quiet confusion. We fought more, but I thought we were just tired parents. I didn't realize what was buried under all the fatigue and stress until it started unraveling years later. One small thread at a time. When Lily turned 2, I started feeling off. At first I blamed stress, then I blamed the flu. Then I stopped blaming anything because deep down I knew something was wrong. It took 3 hospitals and countless tests before I got an answer. And when the doctor walked into the room, eyes heavy, I already knew I wouldn't like what he was about to say. Stage 4. It was everywhere, liver, lungs, bones. He said I had 6 months, maybe less. I stared at the scan, numb. Then I asked only one question. What happens to my daughter? Michael was in the waiting room. When I told him, he cried, truly cried, and for the first time in a long time. And then he promised he would raise Lily with love, that she'd never want for anything, that she'd always know her mother loved her. And I believed him. Until the night I overheard him in the hallway talking on the phone. He didn't know I was awake. He didn't know I could hear him, but I did. I heard everything. She doesn't know, he whispered. Claire still thinks Lily is hers. I lay frozen in the hospital bed, my mind racing. What did that mean? I had just minutes earlier kissed Lily's tiny forehead as she slept in the chair beside me. Her soft curls, the way her breath stuttered when she dreamed, the small freckle on her ear I loved to kiss every night. That was my baby. She was mine. Wasn't she? Michael hung up the phone a moment later and walked back into the room, his face a mask of calm. He sat beside me and took my hand. He didn't know I had heard, but I had. And something inside me broke. The next day, when Michael stepped out to speak with the doctor, I did something I had never done before. I went through his phone. My hands shook, my breath was shallow, but I found the number, though. The one he'd been calling. No name, just a number, a lot of messages. She still doesn't know. Are you sure you want to keep this quiet? We can't go back now. Too much damage would be done. My stomach turned, my vision blurred. The truth was hiding between the words, a truth too big, too cruel to fit into a message thread. That night I called the number. A woman answered. Her voice was shaky, young. She sounded surprised. Hello? This is Claire, I said, trying to keep my voice even. Michael's wife. Silence. You know something, I continued. Something about Lily. A pause, then a sob. That's when she said the words I would never forget. You weren't supposed to find out. It wasn't meant to go this far. The woman's name was Rachel. She had given birth in the same hospital on the same day as me. She'd also had a daughter, and her baby had complications, breathing issues, weak vitals. The staff was frantic, unsure if the baby would make it through the night. Rachel had been unconscious, just like I had been. Michael had been in the hallway watching, listening. And somehow, the nurses made a mistake, or maybe it wasn't a mistake. Maybe it was a decision because Rachel's baby died and mine didn't, and someone made a choice to give Rachel a baby and take mine away. But not her, not Rachel. She was just a scared young woman who had learned the truth months later when she found old hospital files tucked in a closet drawer left behind by her nurse roommate. She confronted Michael, and he begged her not to say anything. He offered money, promised things would be okay, that I was fragile, that I couldn't handle it, and she agreed, at first. But the guilt never left, especially when she found out I was dying. You deserve to know, she said. I don't know how it all happened, but Lily isn't your biological daughter and your real baby, and she's gone. She never got to know your arms, your voice, your love. I dropped the phone. I screamed. Nurses rushed in, but I pushed them away. How could this be real? Everything I knew, everything I had given my life to. Was it all a lie? Was Lily just a story someone wrote for me so I wouldn't break? And if so, why? When Michael returned to the room, I didn't pretend. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just looked him in the eyes and said, "Tell me the truth, every word of it, or I swear I will spend every breath I have left making sure the world hears it from me." He didn't even try to lie. He sat in the chair, put his head in his hands and said, "I didn't want to lose you. I didn't want you to fall apart. You nearly died. And when they told me about the mix-up, I just couldn't tell you. Not after all you'd been through. I thought, what's the difference? You love her, she loves you. That's all that matters, right?" "No," I said, "it's not. That was my daughter, my baby, and I never even got to hold her." The next few days were a blur of quiet sobbing, half-eaten meals, and long, haunting silences. Michael stayed by my side, but the air between us was cold, filled with a kind of grief that didn't have a name. He tried to explain, again and again. Told me how the nurse on duty had confessed the error only hours after my C-section, how Rachel's baby hadn't survived, how the hospital tried to cover it up, how a desperate decision was made to spare the mother, as if I was too fragile to know the truth about my own child. And instead of fighting for me, for us, Michael agreed to the lie. I was scared, he said one evening, his voice barely a whisper. You were in and out of consciousness. I thought maybe this was mercy. Mercy. What a strange word. Because mercy doesn't feel like this. Mercy doesn't come with the weight of knowing I never got to look into my own daughter's eyes, never sang to her, never rocked her in my arms as she slept. Rachel had held her. The nurse had held her. Everyone but me. I couldn't sleep after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined her, my real baby, alone, confused, scared. The hospital room's fluorescent lights cold on her skin. The sound of strangers' footsteps, not mine. And Lily? She was just a baby too. She never asked to be part of this. She only knew me as her mother, and in so many ways, she still was. But that didn't make it easier. If anything, it made it harder. How do you grieve a child you never met while loving one who was never yours? A week passed. Rachel came to visit. She walked in nervously, holding a small wooden box. She looked younger than I expected. Thin, tired eyes, trembling hands. We sat in silence for a while. She placed the box on my lap and whispered. Her name was Ava. I opened the lid. Inside was a tiny pink knit hat, a hospital bracelet, a Polaroid photo of a newborn wrapped in a soft blue blanket. Her nose looked like mine, her mouth like my sister's when she was a baby. My heart broke again. I kept what I could, Rachel said, tears spilling down her cheeks. I knew one day this would come. I just didn't know how or when. We sat like that for a long time, two mothers grieving the same child in different ways. One had given birth to her. The other had buried her. That night, Lily curled up beside me in the hospital bed. She placed her tiny hand on my chest and said softly, Mommy sad? I nodded, too broken to lie. She touched my cheek gently and whispered, Don't be sad, Mommy, I'm here. And for the first time in days, I cried not out of sorrow, but from the sheer aching love I had for this little girl. Yes, she wasn't born from me, but every kiss, every lullaby, every scraped knee I'd kissed better. They were real. And so was my love for her. The next morning, I made a decision. With trembling fingers and a hollow ache in my chest, I called my lawyer. I want to write a letter, I said, to Lily, for when she's old enough to understand. And I did. With every ounce of love I had left, I poured my heart onto the page. My darling Lily, if you're reading this, it means the truth has found you. You may wonder why things were hidden, why you were raised by a woman who didn't give birth to you. But know this, the love I gave you was never fake. It was fierce. It was endless. It was yours. I may not be your mother by blood, but I was your mother in every way that mattered. And if I had a choice, I would choose you again, every time. I folded the letter, placed it in the small wooden box next to Ava's hat, and asked Rachel to keep it for Lily. When she was old enough, she would know the truth, all of it, but not as a betrayal, as a story of love, complicated, imperfect, painful, but love nonetheless. Weeks passed. I returned home with Lily. The house felt both familiar and strange, like stepping into a dream where everything is slightly out of place. Her toys were still scattered across the living room. The fridge still had her drawings stuck there with little heart-shaped magnets. But something inside me had changed. The woman who brought her home was no longer the woman unpacking these memories. Michael tried to fix things. He cooked, he cleaned, he played with Lily like nothing had changed. But I couldn't look at him the same way. "We could have found her," I whispered one night, voice hollow. "We could have named her, held her. But you decided for me. You buried her truth with your silence." He didn't argue. Maybe he knew he didn't deserve to. I started therapy. At first, I couldn't speak more than a few words, but week after week, I started to let it out. The anger, the confusion, the guilt. I told the therapist how I'd sometimes stand over Lily's crib at night, silently watching her breathe, wondering what Ava would have looked like at this age, wondering if she'd have the same little snore, the same habit of curling her toes in sleep. It was cruel how love and grief danced together like that, one always reminding me of the other. Then came the letter from the hospital, a formal apology, a promise of new protocols, a settlement offer, but no amount of money could return what I had lost. Instead, I used that money to create something small, something that felt meaningful. The Ava Foundation, a support group for grieving mothers, for mothers who lost babies, for mothers who were lied to, for women whose pain had been minimized or dismissed. We met every Thursday in a church basement, and slowly, I found strength in their stories. A woman who lost her twins at birth, another whose adoption paperwork had been falsified, one who'd been told her baby was stillborn, only to discover years later that he'd been taken and adopted without her consent. So much pain hidden in quiet corners. So many voices that had never been heard. One rainy afternoon, Rachel came to the meeting. She looked hesitant, almost fragile. But when she spoke, everyone listened. "I raised a child that wasn't mine," she said, voice shaking. "I buried a child that was, and I don't know if I've ever truly forgiven myself." After the meeting, she sat beside me. We didn't talk for a while, then she said, "I think Lily should know us both." My heart twisted. "I've thought about it too," I admitted. "But how do we explain this to a child?" Rachel nodded slowly. "Together." The next weekend, Lily played between us in the park. Rachel brought coloring books and stickers. I brought apple slices and juice. At first, Lily was shy, but within an hour, she had warmed up to Rachel like they'd known each other forever. It was beautiful and strange and sad and hopeful all at once. Watching them, I realized something. Maybe love wasn't meant to fit neatly into roles or labels. Maybe this messy, tangled, shared love was okay. Maybe it was exactly what Lily needed. Two mothers, one past, one future, both holding her with open hands. One night, while brushing Lily's hair, she looked up at me and asked, "Why does Miss Rachel call me her baby sometimes?" I paused, my hand stilled. "Because a long time ago I said gently, you were both our baby, and in some ways you still are." She looked thoughtful. "So I have two mommies." I smiled through tears. "Yes, and both love you very, very much." She grinned. "Cool." Months passed. Rachel and I established an unusual but beautiful rhythm, a shared guardianship not bound by law but by grief, healing, and love. Michael eventually moved out. It wasn't a fight. It wasn't a screaming match. It was two people sitting across from each other knowing something had broken beyond repair. "You were my anchor," he said quietly, gathering his things. "You were supposed to be my shelter," I replied. We didn't say goodbye, just a long, heavy silence, and then the sound of the door closing behind him. I found strength I didn't know I had. I grew into a mother, an advocate, a voice for others who never got the chance to speak. The Ava Foundation expanded. We helped women file for records. We pushed for legislation. We testified in hearings. We printed thousands of leaflets with one message: every mother has the right to know the truth. One evening, a young woman came into our group shaking, holding a yellowed paper. She had just discovered that her child, the one she believed was lost at birth, had lived, had grown up under another name. The hospital never told her. She broke down, sobbing into my arms. I held her tightly because I understood, because I had been her. On Ava's third birthday, the birthday I never got to celebrate with her, I lit a single candle. Rachel joined me. We stood together quietly. No balloons, no cake, just a name whispered into the wind. "She existed," Rachel said. "And she mattered," I added. Lily grew. She called me Mom. She called Rachel Mama Ray. People raised eyebrows. Some didn't understand, but she was happy. And that was all that mattered. She had 2 lunch boxes on field trip days, 2 birthday presents every year, 2 sets of arms to run to at the school gate. And one day when she was older, I gave her a journal. Inside were photos, letters, ultrasounds, a tiny pink sock, and Ava's birth certificate, hidden for too long, now finally in the light. Lily looked up at me, her eyes wide. "Was she me?" "She was your sister," I said gently. "Born at the same time, in the same hospital. But life took us on different paths." She hugged me, longer than I expected. "Then I'll remember her too," she whispered. Years later, Lily would write a college essay titled "The Sister I Never Knew." She won a scholarship. I wept reading it, because Ava's story wasn't lost. It was being carried, in words, in memory, in love. And me? I still visit the hospital sometimes, not for anger anymore, but for peace. To talk to the nurses, to help train new ones, to share my story. Not to shame, but to change. One day, a young nurse stopped me in the hallway. "Your story. It's why I double-check every bracelet now," she said. "It's why I make sure every mother leaves here holding the right child." That was all I needed to hear. A full circle from tragedy to change. As I stand in my garden now, watching Lily play with her own daughter, my granddaughter, I think about Ava. I never got to hold her, never got to tuck her in or kiss her scraped knees. But she's here. In every kind act, in every saved life, in every baby safely placed into the right arms, and in the laughter of a little girl who has 2 grandmothers, one name whispered through the flowers and a legacy built from truth. "Ava," I whisper, "you were never lost. You were loved."